There's a worrying trend going on right now in the world of football that is similar to what I talked about in the last video. If you haven't watched it, it'll be somewhere here. But it relates to ownership and more specifically private equity, which is kind of a new trend in the way of owning a football club. Uh, right now, there's a big story going on revolving John Textor. And if you don't know who he is, let me pull it up here. All right. We got John Textor here, this big guy. He is the owner of Eagle Football Group, which owns, or did own, four clubs: Crystal Palace, Botafogo in Brazil, RWDM, I can't remember the exact acronym, in Belgium, and then Olympique Lyon. Those four clubs were under his wing at one point or another. But as of right now, his group is imploding on itself and is being ripped apart by private equity. So kind of just going through this article here, talking about it. Like I said, Eagle Football Group has disintegrated into a mess of warring shareholders and recriminations dragged down by the weight of its huge debt, which we'll talk about later as this article goes along. And like I said, Olympique Lyon, Botafogo, RWDM, Brussels, which is the club in Belgium, are really in doubt and not sure if they're going to be able to continue as is because of all the financial issues they have. But basically, John Textor and these clubs are at the mercy of the investors who backed them. Most notably is the Ares Investment Group, which is their biggest backer for this group. And a lot of these investment firms are very predatory. They're often seen as the saviors. Like Man United were thinking of like, hey, we need this Saudi public investment firm to come into our group or into our football club and help push us back towards the top of the table. This is kind of the flip side of that, where a lot of private investor firms kind of are super shady and kind of don't make the club better. Um, as a result, many clubs are no longer treated as trophy assets like a lot of people used to do back in the day. A lot of these billionaires and millionaires would buy clubs, especially in the Premier League, because of how much money they were making and how much success they're having on the pitch. And they'd be like, hey, to all their billionaire friends, like, I own this asset. Kind of jiggling the jello plate in front of it and be like, haha, I'm better than you. Kind of a dick swinging contest. But it's now a bunch of people sitting on the books of multinational companies and just really focused on just making as much money as they can. A lot of these private credit funds, they're often targeting a bunch of businesses that are distressed. So like clubs that don't know what their future is holding, they're maybe in financial waters a little bit. A lot of these are football clubs because football clubs are never stable. If a club gets relegated, it's a lot of money being lost. If a club gets promoted or is into a European Cup, they make a lot more money. And so there's a lot of fluctuation going on with money there. So they're not always financially stable unless if you're like in the Premier League for like 6 years in a row and then you become financially stable. Uh, so what is happening to John Textor and his company is that they hold on, let me go back a little bit here. So a lot of these investment firms, they charge extraordinary amounts of interest, commonly 10 to 20% or more annually. And a lot of the times the borrower defaults, and then the contractor has the right to convert the debt into equity. A lot of the time, meaning that they take over the club or kind of just sell it for even more profit to somebody else along the way. And a lot of clubs in European football have been seized by private equity on collateral as loans. Uh, a lot of large names are under that right now. Old Trafford, I'm not Old Trafford. Manchester United and the Emirates are kind of private equity, but they're not in a bad space financially right now because they make so much money because they're some of the biggest clubs in England. that they're not uh, under threat like Eagle Football is, and their creditor Ares Management. Uh, right now, let's see here. Yeah, a lot of the shareholders are now at war with each other in court because of all the assets that they were kind of going back and forth. Um, so the group has kind of dissolved into solvency, and then in March, the holding company was placed into administration, Eagle Football, that is, and because of the following events of default related to a loan from a private equity giant Ares, one of the world's largest private credit managers with a $644 billion total in assets under management as of March 31st this year. And so, who's John Textor? Give a little background. This is John Textor if you don't know. John Textor is a member of the DuPont family in America, arguably one of the richest here. But he's not super rich per se. Like he's wealthy, obviously. Like he did own at one point 4 football clubs, but he is not top dog, like always on the Forbes list, flaunting his wealth. He's kind of a tier under that almost. He's not the top 1%. He's like the top 2%, if you want to say. In August 2021, he got 40% stake in Crystal Palace. In December 2021 later that year, he bought an 80% stake in RWDM, and then a month later, a 90% stake in Botafogo, almost acquiring that outright. And then he merged all these 3 clubs kind of into one Eagle Football brand, and then that November in 2022, and then a month later, December that year, he got a 78% shareholder in Olympique Lyon. So really quick, acquiring a lot of shares in 4 clubs, pretty big clubs, mind you. RWDM might not be the biggest household name, but I think it's a pretty decent sized club in Belgium. But the other 3, Botafogo in Brazil, Olympique Lyon, and Crystal Palace, are pretty massive clubs and have a pretty big brand. So like acquiring those all out quickly, a lot of money, and you need a lot of money. And I don't think John Textor had a lot of money, so obviously you need backers and investors. Comes in Ares Management, and what Ares Management did is that they injected John Textor and his company with 3 loans, totaling $425 million. That is a boatload of money, and these carried a steep payment in kind or PIK loans or interest loans rates. Sorry, they're from 16 to 18%, which is a lot of money. And for those of you who don't know, PIK interest is a financing feature where instead of being paid in cash, the interest is owed, and the interest owed is added to the principal balance on the loan. So if you can't pay the full amount, the interest is kind of just put onto the next bill almost, and it kind of just keeps compounding and compounding until it spirals out of control. Kind of what happened here. From the very beginning, the structure of this financing essentially guaranteed that Eagle Football, was debt burdened immediately off the bat because the amount of money that was injected in them, they could never pay off the interest at the rate it was going. And by mid-2025, more funding was required, and Ares Management provided another loan, this time a little over $100 million with a PIK rate of 19.5% almost. And then a final round of emergency funding was only like 8 months ago in October last year, and that was another $20 million with another rate of 19.4% PIK rate. A lot of money, a lot of interest, a lot of compounding interest, and they were never going to be able to. It was doomed from the start. This brand, and basically Eagle Football had accrued annual interest on these loans, and it was approximately around $76.5 million, and that's just the interest alone. Like they probably hadn't paid back any of the loan, or not much of the loans that the Ares Management had given them initially. And so getting another $76.5 million on top of that is a lot of money to have to work with. So obviously, like I was just saying, Eagle's debt has ballooned into $1.2 billion. $1.2 billion is impossible to pay off with clubs of these size. They're not Real Madrid's, Barcelona's, Liverpool's, Bayern Munich's, PSG's, nothing like that. They don't make that much money. Like Crystal Palace may have won a lot of trophies recently, but they are not that worldwide brand that can just break in money. Same with Botafogo and Olympiacon. They're both having a lot of issues financially right now because of this, and they're not able to get that brand going. So, bleh. And I think it was late last year or early this year, John Textor was forced to sell all of his shares in Crystal Palace to repay some of the money that was owned, and that was to Woody Johnson, who is ironically owned by Eagle. Not Eagle. He owns. I thought he was wearing an Eagle hat here. I got mixed up. But he's the New ah, New York owners, New York Jets owner here in America, and he purchased all those. He got around 190 million, barely enough to pay off the interest just from accrued and such. For all those PIK loans, so he got something out of it. But we move on. As of January this year, Aries formally removed Textor from the board of Eagles holding company, and then in March 27th this year, they placed the company into administration in the UK, almost certainly dooming the company. The administrators, Court Gully, are legally required to liquidate Eagle's stake in its football clubs, but it seems likely this could result in the splintering of the group and differing outcomes for each club. With Olympic Lyon, the only asset Aries management seems to be intent on protecting and managing, probably because it is the biggest brand, unfortunately, and clubs in Brazil and Belgium aren't worldly known. So, sucks for the other two, but they're kind of in limbo right now. And then, since all this is going on, there's a lot of stuff in the background that's happening legally. One of them being that another shareholder in Eagle Football Group, Iconic, is suing John Textor in London for 97 million, which is coincidentally the same amount of money almost as the PIK interest rate, which sucks. Again, so all that money sold to Woody Johnson for Crystal Palace shares, immediately straight to settling legal fees and debt. Botafogo, one of the clubs under this umbrella, launched a legal claim against Olympic Lyon for the return of almost $179 million, which the club says was sent to France and never returned. I don't know if this was in relation to a transfer or just other stuff, because what these groups had under this umbrella was kind of a free kind of market where players and assets and money could just be sent back and forth like freely. Similar to what Blueco does with Strasbourg and Chelsea. But Michel Kang, current chair of Olympic Lyon, is essentially accusing them of mounting a coup, Botafogo that is, to remove him from power. Oh, sorry, never mind, going back. John Textor has submitted a legal claim in France aimed at Aries and another Eagle shareholder, Michael Kang, who's the current chair of Olympic Lyon, of mounting a coup against him. Olympic Lyon currently is facing a $63 million lawsuit from London Commercial Court brought by factoring company PRPF over payments related to the transfer of Igor Jesus to Brentford. Yes, I think it was Brentford that he went to, if I remember correctly. But yeah, a lot of money that he's being sued for. Over in Brazil now, over in Rio, Eagle football has been suspended of their voting rights at Botafogo, and basically the club has been placed into judicial recovery, a legal process allowing the club to renegotiate debts with creditors under court supervision, trying to survive. Basically, they're kind of pulling out all the stops to kind of get out underneath this predatory loan and investment firm, try to stay afloat. And then recently, Aries has reached a settlement with the club, which could see it result in being sold to another investor, unfortunately, GDA Luma Capital, which specializes in distressed assets. Like I talked about in the beginning, a lot of predatory investors like to go after these distressed clubs. And as of all of this, Botafogo is unable to sign new players because they've been hit with a fifth FIFA transfer ban over unpaid debts. probably most likely regarding to all the shit that's going on here with John Textor and his firm or his company. And then Belgium, RWDM has filed a similar petition to Botafogo to try to save off bankruptcy, and they've had their license to operate in the Challenger Pro League revoked, which is one of the top leagues in Belgium. And they basically have until the end of June this month to find a new owner and renegotiate its debt, or they're probably getting relegated and might go into bankruptcy. So, last thing I want to talk about is that the Premier League is no different. Like I said earlier, with how a few clubs are, few major clubs in England are owned by private equity. More than 36 of the clubs, more than 36 of the clubs in Europe's five biggest leagues now have private equity, venture capital, or private debt participation through the majority or minority stakes, including a majority of the clubs in the Premier League. Yeah, it's a problem. It's I think we're going to see in the future a lot more issues like we just saw here with John Textor and his company being ripped apart by private equity. I think clubs in Germany have it the right where the fans own the clubs. Surprising, I know that. But private equity, while it may give a bunch of money to clubs, the debt collector always comes. And as we've seen here with these four clubs, it came hard. And it really broke these clubs, and they're not sure what is going to happen, especially with Botafogo and RWM or DM. Sorry, Olympic Lyon probably will survive because they can play. They play in France, a lot of TV right deals and stuff. But yeah, we these are just more well known clubs. Imagine what like a small club over in like Uruguay can do about something like this. They're most likely going to go under. So it's just a shame. I think private equity has no place in a place like football, especially when clubs are keen to just making money and not care about the success or the fans or the culture that is happening at these clubs. So yeah, hopefully these clubs kind of get their stuff together and are able to keep operating.